They are either shallow.
Oh, there's one, Vaughn.
All right.
Right on the turn. Nice fish.
Deep,
Feels like a good one.
or somewhere in between. Any successful angler knows that before you can catch a fish, you must first put a lure in front of that fish. One of the best ways to do that is by pressing a full lineup of Shad Raps into service. By starting with the shallow Shad Rap and working your way deeper with the larger baits, you can comb the water column. The Shad Rap family of lures allows you the flexibility to locate the fish wherever they are from top to bottom. How deep a lure will run is always a concern when you're casting a crankbait. The most obvious factors that dictate depth are shape and bill design, but there are other factors that will determine a lure's running depth, the length of a cast, line diameter, and retrieve speed can also dramatically affect how deep a bait will ultimately run. To get the maximum depth, make a long cast, then quickly reel the bait down for a few feet. From there, a slow and steady retrieve will drive a Shad Rap to its maximum depth potential. Remember, a few feet in depth can definitely influence the number of bites you receive throughout the course of a day on the water.
You know, I tournament fish all over the country. To do this efficiently and effectively, I need to work a lot of water quickly and isolate those areas where active or biting fish are located. I've learned that casting crankbaits is simply one of the best techniques I know to find fish, and big ones fast. So when is absolutely the best time to cast wraps? Well, believe it or not, that's a fairly simple question to answer. Anytime fish are bunched up in shallow water, 3 to 8 feet being the optimum depth. As a general rule, active fish, and I don't care what species, walleye, bass, stripers, whatever, all move shallow at times to feed. This is when casting the Shad Rap can really shine. Basically, there are two different boat positioning tactics I like to use when I'm crankbait fishing. Anchoring and fan casting an area is one of the most thorough methods to work small, specific fish holding spots. Right now I'm anchored on a shallow, isolated rock pile with finger-like spines. This is what I really call a classic crankbait spot. I've got two rods rigged here, one for the top of the rock reef and one for the edges. This is a number 5 jointed Shad Rap that I'm going to use for the very top of it, and this is a number 9 Shad Rap right here that I'm going to use for the deep edges. On each of these structures, it's important to recognize that there are very specific spots on a spot zones that tend to attract and concentrate feeding fish. For example, the large clean boulders on top of this hump is the exact location where I want to work my lure through. Also, I'd work any inside corner, point, or bend along the length of this rock pile. These are the types of spots where predators will lurk when feeding and using as ambush sites. On these particular spots, make sure you work them thorough. After thoroughly fan casting my first anchor position, I will then reposition the boat in another high percentage spot and simply repeat the process. A really good way for covering a lot of water is using your trolling motor and fan casting a crankbait over vast areas of flats or shoreline.
This tactic enables an angler to cover extensive areas quickly, and many times that's the secret, eliminating unproductive water until you find a productive piece. Most times, hold the boat in deeper water and cast up and retrieve the lures down the drop-off. With an arsenal of Shad Raps, you can match your presentation precisely to the fish's mood. The original and the shallow Shad Rap offer you the purest action you can put in the water. In clear water, when only the most subtle action will do, they're the best choice. When fish need a little more, the RS Shad Rap rattles and suspends. On days when you need to throw them a curve, try the jointed Shad Rap. Its wider and noisier wobble can be just what the doctor ordered.
Oh, there's one. Feels like a good one. Whoa! She might as well jump. Might as well get one more out of her. Whoa! Oh, man. Now that's a good first fish of the day, huh? Good looking fish, good looking fish. Nipped right on the end hook. Kind of nipping at it. Now that tells me something. That's a good one. Get her back. You know, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm holding my boat in and around 12 foot of water in a channel ledge, and there's a big 4-foot flat, and it's filled with rocks. And I'm bouncing the Shad Rap over the rocks. That just came off of the edge, it broke free, bingo, the bass was on. You always want to make contact if you can. Bouncing bottom is key, touching the edges of weeds, trigger strikes, bouncing in and around stumps, running the bait through bushes. All of these are the things that make fish bite on a bait like a Shad Rap.
With any of these baits, it's critical to vary your retrieve. Subtle changes will often entice strikes, so it's vital to realize how the bait was moving prior to catching the fish. Hey, was I reeling fast or slow? Was the lure suspended? Did the fish gobble the lure or simply nip at it? It's important to match your retrieve to the feeding attitude of the fish. In warm water, a fast retrieve and erratic action can be key to triggering feeding fish. On the other hand, during cold fronts, a long pause and a couple of twitches may be needed to trigger the more neutral or negative fish into striking. In dark water or in current, a very slow yet consistent retrieve might be the best option. Hey, a lot of this simply is trial and error.
I like to pump that bait. I've been really pumping it with the rod. Got him.
One of the more important elements of a casting approach is understanding the environmental conditions that tend to stimulate big predators to come into shallow water and feed. Cloudy or overcast days, particularly in clear water, is one of those conditions. Strong winds often can concentrate schools of baitfish in shallow areas and in turn trigger those big predators into a feeding frenzy. Casting crankbaits in current is another good option. Low light periods are always key. Morning, evening, and night is prime rap casting periods.
You know, it's really important to pay attention to the attitude of the fish. Now, remember that first fish that I landed when I said this fish is caught on the last treble hook? This tells me something. When those fish are nipping and you're getting them on that last treble, that means something isn't quite right. It could be in what you're doing with the bait, the action of the bait. It could be the color of the bait. It could be the size of the bait. When they're on and want everything and you're doing it right, it's a mouthful of hooks. They're pinned on both ends. They're gobbling it. That's when you know you got everything tuned right.
Hey, what about lure color? Over the course of a season, I'll use or at least experiment with just about every color in the spectrum. Experienced anglers all agree that color does make a difference. The folks at Rapala take special care to provide just the right color patterns and finishes to mimic forage species found in any region. Sometimes a natural finish is the ticket to success, while other times a brighter, flashy color pattern may be the best choice. You have to experiment every time you're on the water.
You know, every year I get to fish with some awful good fishermen. Tournament walleye fishermen, tournament bass fishermen, guides, and just plain everyday local fishermen. And you know one thing they all got in common? They got Shad Raps in their tackle box. Now that tells you something.